My name is Esteban Cortez, and if you ask the world, they'll tell you I'm a man of numbers, power, and precision. They'll say I built soul wave energy from scratch, that I turned a garage experiment into one of Europe's biggest renewable energy companies. They'll tell you I'm worth over 900 million euros, that I sit on boards, that my signature alone can shift markets. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening. And he comments, but none of that matters when you're a father. Because when it comes to my daughter, Camila, I am just a man who promised her mother on her deathbed that I would protect her from every storm, even the ones that come disguised in tuxedos. It started 6 months ago in the middle of chaos. I was in Dubai, balancing 3 phones, closing a 22 million euro deal with investors who spoke more in riddles than in numbers. My hotel room was a battlefield. Contracts scattered across the desk, half-drunk espresso cooling on the counter, and my assistant waiting for signatures like a soldier ready to march. I was halfway through convincing a skeptical investor when my personal phone buzzed. I don't usually answer personal calls during negotiations, but something about the way the phone lit up, Camila's name flashing across the screen, made me pause. I held up a finger to the conference call, silenced my other 2 phones, and answered. Papa. Her voice carried pure joy, the kind that makes the heart forget about billions and deadlines. You'll never believe this. Manuel proposed last night. For a moment, I thought I misheard. Manuel. The young man she'd been dating for a handful of months. I remembered him vaguely from pictures. Square jaw, expensive smile, always dressed like he was going to a fashion shoot instead of a simple dinner. He proposed. I repeated slowly, sitting back in my chair. The documents in front of me blurred. Already? Yes, she laughed, breathless. It was so romantic. He took me to Valencia's City of Arts and Sciences, right in front of the water. He dropped to one knee. Papa, I said yes. I forced myself to smile into the phone. That's wonderful, Camila. Truly. But inside, every instinct sharpened. I hadn't spent nearly 3 decades building an empire without learning how to read people. And there was something in Manuel's eyes, even in photos, that screamed calculating. When you've been in business long enough, you learn to tell the difference between hunger for success and hunger for shortcuts. Manuel was the latter. Sweetheart, I said, my voice gentle. I'd love to meet him properly. But one favor, don't tell him about me. Not yet. There was silence on the other end. Then a soft laugh. Papa, are you serious? Completely. But why? Because I want to know if he loves you, not the Cortez fortune. Tell him I'm just a sustainability consultant. A simple man with a modest life. Will you do that for me? Another pause. Then, in the voice of the little girl who used to trust me with scraped knees and broken toys, she said, Okay, Papa. I'll keep your secret. And so the test began. 2 weeks later, I drove to Valencia to meet the Alvarez family. I didn't take my Maserati. I didn't wear my custom-tailored suits. Instead, I rented a battered 8-year-old seat hatchback and bought a second-hand suit for 20 euros from a thrift shop. I slicked back my salt and pepper hair with cheap gel, left my Rolex in Barcelona, and put on a simple watch I hadn't worn since the 90s. When I pulled up outside the Alvarez home, a modern villa with glass walls and a driveway full of luxury cars, I saw Manuel waiting at the door with his parents. He wore an immaculate navy suit, his tie pinned with silver. His parents had the same polished smiles of people who measured worth in brands and connections. Señor Cortez, Manuel greeted me, his voice smooth as marble. Camila's father. Finally. Please, I said with a polite smile. Just Esteban. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my worn shoes. I saw the flicker in his expression. Judgment. He tried to cover it with charm, but I've made a career out of watching faces when they think no one is looking. That split-second sneer told me more than words ever could. Inside, the table was set for dinner. Crystal glasses, expensive wine, a spread of seafood and meats. The Alvarez family liked to show off. Manuel's mother asked polite questions about my consulting work, though I could see in her eyes she already dismissed me. His father barely acknowledged me, too busy sipping his wine and checking his watch. The first real blow came when the waiter approached. I hadn't realized they'd hired catering for the evening. Before I could open my mouth to order, Manuel leaned toward the waiter with a smirk. "He'll have the cheapest soup," he said, loud enough for the table to hear. "Gotta keep things within budget for him." Laughter rippled across the table. His father chuckled. His mother hid a smile behind her napkin. I smiled, nodding, as though nothing pierced me. Inside, my chest burned. Not from humiliation. I've been insulted by heads of state and rivals far sharper than this boy, but from rage. Because this man thought he was mocking me. He didn't realize he was mocking my daughter's blood, my late wife's memory, my entire family. Camila's eyes flickered to me, worried, apologetic. I offered her a gentle smile, the kind that said, "It's all right, Mija. Let them show themselves." That night, as I drove back to Barcelona in the rattling rental car, the city lights blurring past, I clenched the steering wheel tighter than I should have. Manuel was exactly who I thought he was. And if he thought I would stand by and let him reduce me to a punchline, he had another thing coming. But I would not scream. I would not rage. I would not even confront him yet. No, I would wait. I would bide my time. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge comes not from striking back immediately, but from letting a man dig his own grave, and then handing him the shovel. And Manuel Alvarez had just started digging. The weeks that followed tested every ounce of patience I had built over decades of boardrooms and backroom deals. Pretending to be a modest consultant while sitting across from a boy who thought arrogance was a virtue was not easy. But I reminded myself, revenge is like chess. The board must be studied, every move anticipated, every weakness exposed. And Manuel Alvarez was full of weaknesses. He called me Señor Esteban, with that polite but distant tone, the kind you use with a taxi driver or a doorman. When he shook my hand, he never looked me in the eye. When Camila spoke of our family memories, her mother's love of painting, our summer trips to Granada, Manuel would force a smile, then redirect the conversation to his favorite subject, himself. But I stayed silent, watchful. The more rope I gave him, the more he tangled himself. One Saturday afternoon, Manuel invited me to join him at his family's golf club. I arrived in my thrift store jacket, driving the same rental hatchback. The parking lot gleamed with Bentleys, Porsches, and sleek BMWs. My car looked like a dented toy left behind by mistake. When I stepped onto the manicured green, Manuel smirked. "Oh, don't worry, Esteban. I'll cover your caddy. Wouldn't want you struggling with the fees." The men around him chuckled. I nodded, forcing a grateful smile. "That's very kind of you." Inside, I boiled. I had sponsored entire golf tournaments. I had personally written checks that funded eco-friendly expansions for clubs richer than this one. But here, in this role I had chosen, I was the humble consultant with nothing but gratitude. As we played, Manuel showed off, swinging dramatically, bragging about his business ventures, which, from what I gathered, were mostly failed startups bankrolled by his parents. Each time I made a shot, he exaggerated his praise, the kind of backhanded compliments meant to humiliate. "Not bad, Esteban. Maybe one day you'll afford your own membership." The others laughed, their voices bouncing off the clean-cut grass. I simply smiled and nodded, letting his arrogance pile higher. By the 9th hole, I knew more than I needed. Manuel didn't love golf. He loved attention. And he used every opportunity to remind me that, in his world, money determined worth. Good, I thought. Keep showing me your true face. The real breaking point came at a dinner Camila hosted for both families. She had set the table in her Valencia apartment with care. Candles, flowers, her mother's old silverware. I could see how much she wanted harmony between us all. But Manuel, as always, couldn't resist. Halfway through the meal, as we ate paella, Manuel leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. You know, Camila, sometimes I worry about your father. Camila frowned. What do you mean? He gestured toward me. Well, he's simple. Not exactly the kind of man who can support us if times get tough. Don't get me wrong, Esteban, you're very dignified. But you wouldn't understand the pressures of wealth and success. The room went silent. Camila's face turned pale. I placed my fork down gently. You might be right, Manuel. I've never had the kind of success you flaunt. I've only managed to scrape by with modest consulting. The smug smile that spread across his face almost made me lose my composure. You see, he said to Camila. Exactly my point. But don't worry, mi amor. Once we're married, you won't have to rely on your father. You'll have me. Camila's eyes darted to me, filled with apology and confusion. She loved him, or thought she did, but she could see the disrespect. I offered her a soft smile, as though none of it hurt. But inside, a storm raged. He thought I was powerless. He thought he had already won. That night, I lay awake in my Barcelona penthouse, staring at the ceiling. The city buzzed below, lights flickering across the skyline. And I planned. The wedding loomed closer. Invitations had gone out. The Alvarez family spared no expense. Lavish halls, imported flowers, a guest list filled with Valencia's elite. Camila begged me to walk her down the aisle. I promised I would. But I also knew it would be the day I ended Manuel Alvarez's ambitions forever. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I tested the waters. I called Manuel privately, suggesting we meet for coffee. He agreed, smug as ever. We met at a cafe overlooking the Mediterranean. He arrived in a tailored suit, gold watch gleaming, while I wore the same cheap jacket. Esteban, he said smoothly, sitting across from me. What's on your mind? I stirred my espresso slowly. You're marrying my daughter. I want to be sure you'll take care of her. He leaned back, laughing softly. Of course, of course. She'll be fine. But to be honest, Esteban, you don't really have much say in this. I mean, you're you. No offense, but you can't exactly provide much for her. Luckily, I can. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness roll across my tongue. And what do you want from her? I asked quietly. He smirked. A wife who looks good on my arm. A family connection. And maybe, his eyes flickered with greed. Some financial help, eventually. After all, she's used to comfort, isn't she? And with a father like you, well, she'll have to downgrade. I held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. I see. When I left that cafe, the plan solidified. At the wedding, he would see who I truly was. And he would lose everything in one blow, his pride, his image, his bride. But I had to endure one final humiliation before that day arrived. It was the rehearsal dinner. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, laughter, and champagne. Manuel's family treated me like a relic, present, but irrelevant. Then, in front of everyone, Manuel raised his glass. "To my future father-in-law," he said with mock warmth. "May he always have enough coins in his pocket to buy us a loaf of bread when times get hard." Laughter erupted. Guests clinked glasses. Camila froze, her smile faltering. I simply lifted my glass, nodding as though it was all a harmless joke. But my hands clenched around the stem until I thought it might break. That was the final straw. Manuel Alvarez had dug his grave deep, and in just a few days I would bury him in it, without ever raising my voice. The morning of the wedding dawned with a sky too perfect, too blue, as though Valencia itself had dressed for the occasion. Church bells chimed in the distance, and the streets filled with cars carrying guests in their finest. To the world, it was a day of celebration. To me, it was a battlefield. I stood before the mirror in my modest hotel room, dressed in a suit deliberately plain. Not the tailored Italian pieces hanging in my Real closet, but something borrowed, something worn. The disguise had been flawless so far, and today it would reach its peak. Today I would play my part until the final act. When I arrived at the cathedral, Manuel's family greeted me with polite indifference. They were radiant in silk and jewels, every movement dripping with wealth. To them, I was still the poor father of the bride, tolerated only because tradition demanded my presence. "Señor Esteban," Manuel's mother said, barely glancing at me. "You'll be seated near the back, of course. Family section is for closer relatives." Closer relatives. I smiled as though grateful for scraps. The humiliation no longer stung. It was fuel. Camila appeared soon after, radiant in her gown. For a moment, I almost forgot the plan. My daughter looked like her mother had on our wedding day, graceful, hopeful, unaware of the storm about to descend. When she took my hand, her eyes softened. "Papa, are you ready?" she whispered. "Always," I said, and I meant it in ways she could not yet imagine. The ceremony was beautiful, almost cruelly so. Flowers lined the pews, violins played, and every guest leaned forward to watch as I walked Camila down the aisle. My chest swelled with pride, even as Manuel waited with that smug, victorious smirk plastered across his face. When I placed her hand into his, he didn't even thank me. He only gripped her fingers tightly, as though claiming a prize he had earned. The priest spoke. Vows were exchanged. Rings glinted under the golden light. And when the kiss sealed their union, applause erupted. To the guests, it was the beginning of a fairy tale. To me, it was the last moment before the mask fell. The reception was held in a grand hall by the sea, chandeliers reflecting off marble floors, tables heavy with food and wine. Waiters rushed to and fro, carrying silver trays. The Alvarez family reveled in their glory, entertaining politicians, businessmen, and dignitaries. I sat quietly, watching, waiting. Then came the humiliation. One of Manuel's friends, a lanky man with slicked hair, approached me near the buffet table. "Señor Esteban, I hear you're a consultant. Tell me, what kind of clients do you have? Small shops? Street vendors?" Laughter bubbled among the group. "Nothing so grand," I replied evenly. "Just enough to get by." Another chimed in, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Careful, Manuel, your father-in-law might ask for a loan one day." The crowd chuckled. Manuel joined in, raising his glass high. "Don't worry, amigos. If that day comes, I'll give him some work, maybe as our gardener." The laughter roared. Glasses clinked. And in that moment, Manuel believed he had finally destroyed me in front of everyone. Camila's smile faltered. She touched his arm, whispering, "Manuel, please," but he only waved her off, basking in the attention. I clenched my fists under the tablecloth, but my face betrayed nothing. The time was not yet right. The night wore on. Speeches were made, toasts given. And then, as if fate wanted to sharpen the blade, the final insult arrived. I had stepped outside briefly to catch my breath, the cool sea air calming my thoughts. When I returned, I found Manuel standing with a group of guests near the dance floor. He held a large silver bucket in his hands, filled with ice and empty bottles. "Ah, Esteban," he called, grinning like a wolf. "Just the man I need. Could you help clear this? It's heavy, and well, you seem used to this kind of work." Laughter again. Cameras flashed. The bucket dripped cold water onto the floor. For a long moment, I stood frozen. Every eye in the room turned toward me. Guests waited, amused, curious. Camila's face burned red with shame. "Manuel, stop it," she hissed. But he ignored her, thrusting the bucket toward me. I reached out slowly, my hands steady. I took the bucket, feeling the chill seep through the metal. For a second, I imagined smashing it against his head, watching his arrogance crumble. But no. Violence was not my weapon. Instead, I lowered my gaze, shoulders slumping, and carried the bucket away like a servant. The laughter followed me, echoing in my ears. Manuel's victory seemed complete. But what he did not know was that the bucket was the last piece of the puzzle. The final insult that would make my revenge unforgettable. Later, when the hall quieted and the music swelled, I made my move. I walked to the center of the room, where the dance floor shimmered under soft lights. I set the bucket down carefully, straightened my plain suit, and cleared my throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice calm but firm. "May I have a moment?" The chatter hushed. Dozens of faces turned toward me, curious. Manuel, flushed with wine and pride, raised an eyebrow. "What now, Esteban?" he mocked. "Another speech about hard work and simple living?" The crowd chuckled, waiting for another joke at my expense. But I only smiled. "No. I think it's time you all knew the truth." Gasps rippled through the room. Manuel frowned. Camila looked at me, confused, frightened. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small envelope. Inside were cards, business cards, invitations, proof of who I truly was. With slow, deliberate movements, I laid them on the nearest table. Names gleamed in gold. Logos of companies worth millions. Invitations to galas Manuel could never dream of entering. "My name," I said quietly, "is Esteban Cortez, chairman of Cortez Global, investor, philanthropist, and the man who has funded half the ventures in this very room." The silence was deafening. Guests craned their necks, eyes wide. Whispers spread like fire. Manuel's smirk faltered. His hand slipped from Camila's arm. I picked up the bucket he had forced upon me earlier, holding it high for all to see. "Tonight, I was your servant, your joke, your poor father-in-law, and I carried this with humility. But make no mistake," my voice sharpened, cutting through the hall. "The only trash here is the man who thought he could mock my family and steal my daughter's future." Gasps erupted. Some guests covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Camila's eyes filled with tears. Manuel stammered, his face pale. This is some trick. You're lying." I met his gaze with a calm so cold it froze him where he stood. "Am I?" At that moment, one of Valencia's most respected bankers stepped forward. "He's telling the truth," the man said firmly. "I've dealt with Esteban Cortez for years. He's one of the wealthiest men in Spain." The room exploded, and Manuel Alvarez realized his empire of arrogance had collapsed in front of everyone. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. What had once echoed with laughter and music now swirled with gasps, murmurs, and the scraping of chairs as people leaned forward to witness the drama unraveling before their eyes. Manuel stood pale and trembling, like a man stripped of armor in the middle of a battlefield. The arrogance that had fueled him all evening had drained away, leaving only fear. Camila clutched her gown with both hands, her eyes darting between us. "Papa, is this true? You've been hiding who you are." I turned to her, my voice gentler than it had been all night. "Yes, Mija. I hid it for one reason. To see if the man you loved cared for you, or only for what he believed you could offer him. And tonight, the truth has spoken louder than anything I could have said." Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head slowly, as though the entire world had tilted beneath her feet. Manuel, desperate now, lunged forward. He grabbed her hand, gripping tightly. "Camila, listen. He's lying to you. He's just trying to control you, to turn you against me. I love you. You know that." But his voice cracked, betraying him. And worse, the guests weren't silent anymore. They were murmuring, sneering, whispering words he could not ignore. "Arrogant boy. Used the father, used the daughter. Thought he could humiliate Cortez." The tide had turned, and Manuel was drowning. I stepped closer, my eyes fixed on him. "You said you loved her," I said evenly. "Yet you mocked her family. You made her stand in silence while you laughed at her father. That is not love, Manuel. That is ambition dressed in pretty words." Camila's shoulders shook. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time I saw the veil lift from her eyes. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered. "You suspected who he was. That's why you kept pushing, kept trying to make him small, because you were afraid." "No," Manuel barked, but his voice was too loud, too frantic. "I didn't know. I just—" he faltered, words colliding in his throat. I tilted my head, studying him. "You didn't know, but you treated me this way anyway. Which is worse, Manuel? Cruelty because you thought you could get away with it, or cruelty because you thought you were safe from consequence?" Silence. The guests hung on every word. Manuel dropped to his knees suddenly, the sharp sound echoing across the marble floor. He clutched Camila's dress as if it were the only thing keeping him from falling into the abyss. "Camila, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "Don't let him destroy us. You're my wife now. Everything we dreamed, we can still have it. I'll change, I swear it. Just don't leave me." His tears streaked across his face, his hands trembling as they clung to her. For a moment, she faltered. The love she had believed in, the promises he had whispered late at night, it all pulled at her heart. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. I stepped closer, laying a steady hand on her shoulder. "Mija," I said softly, "a man who begs only when exposed is not a man who has changed. He is a man who fears losing his mask." Camila turned to me, searching my eyes for strength. Her lips trembled. Then, slowly, she pulled her hand free of Manuel's grasp. His eyes widened in horror. "Camila, no. You can't." But she stepped back, shaking her head. "I don't even know who you are anymore." The hall erupted. Guests whispered fiercely, some shaking their heads, others already pulling out phones. Cameras flashed, recording every second of Manuel Alvarez's undoing. I lifted the silver bucket he had forced upon me earlier, setting it down at his feet with deliberate care. "Here," I said quietly. "You wanted me to carry your trash. Now you may carry your own." The words struck harder than any slap. Manuel stared at the bucket, his chest heaving, and for the first time, he understood. He wasn't just humiliated, he was finished. A respected banker stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Señor Cortez, I believe this partnership with the Alvarez family is no longer viable." One by one, others echoed him. Investors, politicians, business leaders. Every connection Manuel had paraded as proof of his worth crumbled in minutes. By the time silence returned, Manuel Alvarez was no longer a proud groom. He was a man standing in ruins, mocked not for his arrogance but for his collapse. The wedding was over, though no one dared say it aloud. Guests began to drift toward the exits, murmuring, gossiping, eager to spread the story across Valencia. Camila stood frozen beside me, pale and shaken. I wrapped an arm around her, guiding her gently toward the doors. As we stepped outside into the cool night air, she finally spoke. Her voice was small, wounded. "Papa, how could I have been so blind?" I pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Love makes us blind, Mija. But truth opens our eyes. What matters is that you see him now for what he truly is." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "And what about you? You lied too. You hid who you were from me." The words pierced deeper than I expected. I sighed, tightening my hold. "Yes. And for that, I am sorry. I did it to protect you. To show you the truth of a man who claimed to love you. But I should have trusted you with it sooner." For a long time, she said nothing. Then she leaned into me, resting her head on my chest. "I just need time." And I would give her all the time in the world. Behind us, through the tall glass doors, Manuel still knelt on the marble floor, clutching the bucket as though it could save him. But nothing could. Not now. Tomorrow, the story would spread across newspapers, social media, whispered in boardrooms. The Alvarez name would become synonymous with disgrace, arrogance, and downfall. My revenge was complete. Not through violence, not through anger, but through truth. And as I walked my daughter into the night, I knew this. Sometimes the loudest vengeance is carried out in silence, with nothing more than patience, love, and the certainty that arrogance always destroys itself in the end. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.